So where isn't it happening? And what are those gaps looking like in terms of the distances between the various schools and the types of opportunities that are being provided? 32% of high schools report reducing tutoring and other after-school support services. So again, you're not getting summer school, you're not getting after-school programs, you're not getting counseling, you're not getting art and music, while it still is kind of an upper tier is. And what that ultimately means in terms of life opportunities. Also, we're losing an incredible number of the most important people in the educational system, and that's our teachers. California students have lost 34,000 teachers. We've lost over 10% of our teachers in the state of California in a very short period of time. Just 3 years. 3 years of the state of California, we lost 10% of our teachers. It's amazing when you think about that. And what that means in terms of that many fewer experts, folks that are in the classroom helping students, plus over that many, and we're losing more. And if we talk about the budget cuts I talked about that would come in the next year, that number is going to jump by a lot. Class sizes are up. We already rank last in the nation. When you look at the number of students per pupil for a class, or administrators, even your principals, your assistant principals, we are always dead last, 50th. By any measure, we're 51st in terms of counseling because DC does better than us. Now, another issue that comes up, another issue the ACLU has dealt with is that, as I talked about, almost all state constitutions have a provision that talks about the right to education. California's constitution, this is in your materials, also has a provision that talks about every student is entitled to a free public education. Free public education. And what does that mean? As the California Supreme Court said in 1984, free means free. It's not complicated. If you want to participate in any educational activity, they cannot charge you for it. They can't charge you for it and then say, but if you can't afford it, raise your hand, self-identify as the fact that you don't have the means that maybe some of your peers do, come forward and then we'll make it free. No, free means free. Up front, everything's free. So what happens though is that ultimately in a time of budget cuts, sometimes folks don't know what the law is, and you will see people grasping to try to find ways to fund programs that have been slashed, as we just talked about, and start actually making it so you have to actually pay to learn. Right? But what happens, obviously, this requires families to pay unconstitutional fees. That promotes inequality within schools. Right? So if you're wealthy, no problem. You get to have a counselor. You get to have a class, a book for your AP English class. You have, to use a couple of our clients' perspectives, you get to have a Spanish workbook, so your grade actually has the potential to be an A. Because if you don't, there's no way you're going to get an A. You can't turn in those assignments. Literally, these are the types of problems that we're encountering. It also makes education a commodity for sale. We just talked about, at our best, the ideal is this is a basic fundamental human right. It's one we have put into our state constitution to say all students have a right to this. So start saying, you know what, actually, we're going to give it to the highest bidder. If you can afford, then you get the full-scale education. If you can't, well, we're going to give you this watered-down version if you come to our school. And then disadvantaged students whose families cannot pay, obviously, because they don't have the ability to participate on a full and equal basis as everybody else. So what can you do? And I wanted to try to keep this broad. I know you're going to be talking a lot about this in your breakout sessions today. So I want you to start thinking, what can you do? Sometimes this feels very big, right? If we talk about budget cuts. Obviously, none of us in this room, we can pass a hat. We're not going to get $17 billion by passing the hat and figuring out how we're going to solve the school funding crisis. But what do you do to ensure equal educational opportunity? Research and educate. So find out where are the problems. Many of you already probably know off the top of your head. You can start shouting them out with your question and answers or in your forms. I know where there's problems at my school. I've talked to my friends. I see peers. I know where there's issues at other schools where students don't have the same type of opportunity that maybe you have, or maybe you don't have the same opportunity you see others that have. I can point those out. But it also might require you to start asking some people. Start talking to friends, talking to peers, reading the newspaper, starting to pay attention to where is it that there are shortages, where is it that students don't have access to these resources and the same types of opportunities. And then educate your peers. I know all of you do this already in this sphere. Start talking about their rights, the Williams rights. They're supposed to be up on your classroom wall, right? Start talking about what it is and how you can protect those rights. And then take action. We have worked with groups of students across the state who have come together and said, we want to ensure, for instance, that every student in our school has the books that they need to go home and study. So we're going to collectively organize, we're going to file Williams complaints as a collective, go to our principal and make a stand. So no one feels like they're going to be singled out as the only person to kind of stand up. We're going to do this collectively. We've had others that have gone all the way to Sacramento. So we're talking about local and state action. folks who have talked to their local assembly members, local state senators, gone into their offices and talked about the fact that they want to see that they prioritize education when it comes to budget cuts. They want to see that these standards are maintained. You know, different years, people have looked at the Williams standards, for instance, and said, you know what, it's tight budget times. Maybe we don't need to actually require that every student have a book. I know we lost in court, but maybe we just tweak it for a couple of years. By the time they challenge it, you know, we'll fix it back. Fight that. Talk to your local school boards. One of the wonderful things about schools, there are multiple levels of advocates and representatives that you have. You have your principals, you have your district superintendents, you have your local school boards, then you have your county boards of education. You have your state assembly, your state senate, you have your governors. All of these individuals, all of these bodies are involved in critical education opportunity questions and laws, rules, regulations. Find out where you need to go. Go speak to them. Go as a group. The student voice doesn't get heard enough. When I'm in Sacramento for hearings and education hearings, you have advocates and lobbyists for almost every single group in the state. Teachers, administrators, school building officials. You do not have advocates for students there except on a very, very, very rare occasion. And that's from a couple of select groups. You can have your voice heard. The whole room gets silent. I've seen the chairs, there's actually Senator Lowenthal, who's from Long Beach, who's been the chair of the Senate Education Committee. When students had come up, I mean, all the business kind of grinds to a halt because they realize it's a really special opportunity to actually hear directly from students. And even if you don't have to speak about your direct experience, you know, it's something, a deprivation you have personally experienced, but you can speak in the same way you speak about the injustices you see abroad, the injustices you see at home, that you can speak and say, as students in the state of California, as your constituents, we come to you to demand that you protect equal educational opportunity. And you have a right to do that, and you have a very strong voice if you choose to exercise it. So this is my information. You can also see my email address in the brochure that we have, the Williams brochure. There's a Williams email address that comes directly to me. If you all have questions about Williams, about education law, you simply